like to thank Erich Campbell for coming into the Stahls TV studios and spending some time with us, sharing some insight on the embroidery and heat printing market. Erich is the Partner Relationship Manager with DecoNetwork, and so you have quite a bit of experience with the embroidery market in the industry, and so you lend a lot of unique insight. So we appreciate you coming in here. Do you want to share some of the background with the Stahls TV audience on kind of what you do and what you've been doing in the industry?
Sure. Thank you for having me. Well, my background in the industry really is as a decorator for about the last 20 years almost, starting out as an embroidery operator and then eventually as a digitizer. So for about 18 years, that's what I did. I digitized day in, day out doing production. But during that, what people know me from, if they know me at all, which minor stardom, right, is because of all the writing I did for the industry. For many years, I've written blogs and magazines and different posts for various industry sources. So really what you know me from probably is that, or from teaching in the last year. Now, and with DecoNetwork, what I'm doing now is trying to bring together decorators and vendors and different partners so that we all have the best kind of relationships we can have that have value for everyone.
Perfect, yeah, so quite a bit of experience, a lot of time spent in the apparel decorating industry, and I know you're passionate about it, I know you love it.
Absolutely.
And so when you think about just looking at the embroidery market, I know that's where most of your experience is, what are the biggest reasons that you see embroiderers start to really expand into heat printing?
Well, honestly, they don't have a method to do any other kind of decoration but embroidery, and printing is really necessary. I mean, embroidery is not the best medium for everything as much as I love it. You do have to have printing for doing lighter garments, t-shirts, things like that, and it just makes sense to expand. And heat printing has the lowest barrier of entry and really is a friendly thing, especially the way you guys do it at Stahls, because there's so much education involved and there's so much hand-holding that people do, you can really get into it pretty simply.
Yeah, so low cost definitely to get into, and also the space and everything that's required. You know, just a minimal investment, minimal space required for you to add that to your shop. So I think it's a lot of benefits. Now, for those that do both, do you see any kind of production tips or anything for being able to run a business with embroidery and heat printing?
Well, the best production tip I can have is just that you pay attention to the spaces that you have for each thing, making sure you have threadability if you have to go from one to the next, and certainly to think about the layout of your shop so you have good throughput. Invariably what people do is they'll kind of get jammed together, but they don't have a good place for garments to come in and leave, and they really need to make sure they're thinking about that throughput as they plan their shop.
Yeah, definitely planning the workflow as far as from start to finish, and you know, even with embroidery, thinking about what else can I be doing when my machine's sewing out that I can maximize my time or my employees' time, and I think they both mesh well together for that.
Oh, absolutely. Since embroidery takes the time that it takes, and it's just going to be a time-intensive thing, being able to heat press and print next to your embroidery machine is just awesome. As long as you keep it ergonomic and make sure that everything flows correctly, and it's not too hard for anybody to get to the things that they need.
Yeah, if you can kind of start that embroidery machine, turn around and press a shirt, that's obviously the ideal way to maximize your time.
But still while you're watching your embroidery machine,
well, of
so
course,
that you're making sure your thread breaks are taken care of and nothing's going wrong.
Keep your eye there. I guess that's why it's good to have a transfer that applies quickly so you can not burn a shirt while you're fixing that thread.
Absolutely.
Great. So great tips there. Pricing is also a challenge that we see a lot with all apparel decorators, but embroidery, especially with being able to just price effectively. Do you see any tips for pricing embroidery or heat printing together or with each other?
Well, I think the critical thing is to realize what's good for what process. Heat printing per impression is going to be cheaper, so when you're having a budget-conscious client, it's good to have heat printing as an option. Embroidery is, of course, the gold standard for certain things, and you're going to want to use embroidery, and it's a high-value proposition, but it's slow. So when you need fast and budget, heat printing is a really great option to have. So that's really the pricing thing to watch for, is to know what makes sense for what kind of customer and what kind of garment.
Yeah, so it really comes down to knowing your customer, knowing their budget, and then offering a print solution that fits them. But I think, you know, I know you agree, but heat printing and embroidery tend to mesh well together because they allow you to fit both bills. So you have that higher end customer that kind of gives that golden standard, and then that more cost conscious one as well, a solution for that.
Absolutely.
Great. So one of the great things we wanted to bring you in for is really you've done some unique out-of-the-box applications with embroidery. You've really kind of taken it to the new step, and you like to play around with it. Obviously, that's where your passion really comes out. So what are some of the next level things that embroiderers can do with their machines?
Well, what's really been coming out lately, I mean, you guys have the Ripway applique, which is really awesome. It's great to see people doing that because it's such a simple way to get so much texture and color into your embroidery, and it's actually quite simple and quite permanent. People worry about that, but once it's pressed, it's very permanent and it looks very good and it's easy. You don't have to have extra equipment. So I think that's one of the great things. It seems like, okay, oh, it's next level, it looks great, but it's super easy to do. And I hate to say, sometimes you feel like you're cheating when you do it.
Yeah.
One of the other great things I like to do is to do applique and to layer on other stitching elements on top of the applique. You'll also find some people don't always love the look of shiny applique. I mean, I like it. I like how the poly twill looks, but sometimes people don't like that. And the great thing you can do is to use light stitching on top of it. You still get a large stitch savings, but you can add some texture which breaks up that kind of area. Now, certainly, one of the other things I do a lot of is patch making. I know we've talked about that, and I've talked about that with people frequently. I can't tell you how many people have said, okay, go grab that cutter, get that PS Poly 12, that's how we're going to get that done. But patch making is another thing that I think is huge now. I mean, not only is patch making and collecting huge, but applying patches to garments has just gotten bigger and bigger in the last couple of years. And I don't think it's going to go anywhere for a while. So I think that's the other thing you can do is patch making. And we can certainly talk more about that.
Yeah, and I think you share you shared with me a unique process that you do for patches and kind of your experience in that there.
Well, and it's funny. It's like there's nothing that I discuss, no matter where I go, what I'm teaching, that doesn't end up in patches. And in this particular case, it's I like to use a water-soluble backing or stabilizer. I don't like saying backing because stabilizer is what it does. It's not just there to be behind stuff. So you take your water-soluble stabilizer, a couple of sheets of a fiber stabilizer, and then you essentially do an applique. And it's the same kind of thing. I like to use a custom cut, so I'll use something like the Graph-Tech cutter, Roland cutter, cut some of that the poly twill, the pressure-sensitive poly twill, run a stitch line to show where it goes, slap it down. And then the one thing that's different is I run all the central material in the patch first, all of the design that's in the center, before I run the edge, because that way you don't take the stabilization out of the stabilizer. You don't start tearing that too quickly before it gets to the end. The great thing about that water soluble, you cut away the excess, you run a little water around the edge, and you get a very clean edge it's not a marrowed edge, the classic edge of patching, but it is a clean edge that doesn't show any sort of excess or backing. And that's what I really love to use. Honestly, that's what I use that poly twill for the most, is just making tons and tons of patches. Yeah,
so it's a great and easy way for embroiderers to kind of get into patch making without a lot of extra expense or machinery or anything that. And so you've got some unique stories, I think, you've done a lot of patches for a lot of unique companies and a lot of entities there.
Oh yeah, no, the best thing is that in New Mexico, in Albuquerque where I'm from, we have a lot of filming for TV and movies, and so things like Better Call Saul or Breaking Bad or The Night Shift, we've done a ton of patches for those folks. And what's always fun to tell a story, I mean, it's for the folks out there, it's like, what it is, it's regular production. Everybody says, oh, it's fun to work on the movies. I'm like, no, it's just fast. Luckily, they do pay more for it, though. And the thing that I would say with patches to look for is that you actually get a really high rate of return on these things. You don't have a garment that you can ruin, and you don't have that high markup, and all you have is a little piece of material, and sometimes you can charge as much as an embroidered garment for a single patch. So it actually has a really high margin. But the cool thing is being able to work on these things where they're on screen. The one story I always love to tell, though, is that I had a patch that I did for Better Call Saul, and it's a shoulder patch on an Albuquerque policeman, and everybody was just telling me, because I was agonizing over the detail, because it was our first piece we did for him. They're like, oh, don't worry about it, nobody will ever see it. The second season, or the first episode of the second season, the policeman walks out, and he's from here up on screen. So even like on a 50-inch screen, patches about this big, so you can see everything that's wrong with it.
You can see everything that's wrong with it.
I can see everything that's wrong with it. Not everybody can.
Yeah, it's great. It's really interesting. You're able to kind of find a niche there in your local area, and I think a lot of decorators can really benefit from being able to find that niche, what works well for them in their market, and really expand on it and find something high profit like that.
Well, and the great thing about honestly, this is also with heat printing too, it just expands your abilities. And what I always say to people is that if you're an embroiderer right now and you don't know how to expand or how to get into printing, I mean, it's tempting to go direct to garment. There's nothing wrong with direct garment, but it's very expensive. So if you're a small shop or a home shop, start with a heat press. That's the first step you should always start from. Go from there to a cutter. And from there, you get the access to so many materials and treatments. It's just immense. And it's also, honestly, I'm not saying there's no skill to it, but it's not that hard. It's not as hard as some of the other processes.
Right.
are.
It's definitely, when you compare it to DTG or even direct screen printing, it's a lot easier to just pick up and start doing without a lot of training.
Absolutely.
And obviously at Stahls TV, we do a lot of training as well, so it's easy to learn new techniques and new strategies there. And so I think heat printing lends well to helping people really improve their business. And so there's a lot of ways. What ways do you see for the decorator or the embroiderer who wants to expand? What ways do you see for them to really improve their business moving forward?
Well, there's a lot of ways. First thing I'd like to say to embroiderers, and maybe I'll look at you out there directly, embroiderers, you need to sometimes adopt these new technologies and come out here and test things out. I mean, the tried and true is great, but we all have to get out there and try new things. And certainly, heat printing is part of that. I think it's coming to the point where people understand it. They're starting to get it more often, and they don't think of it as just vinyl. The glitter flake is out there. The different materials are out there. And honestly, the other thing I'd say is it's an incredible savings of labor. One of the favorite pieces we used to do for trade shows, I had a real estate company we worked for, and we did the distressed applique. That's a thing where we pulled it out of the box, heat pressed it, and out it went. That's an incredible margin for us, especially when you consider what it would be like to do all that custom. So that's really great. But what I would love to say is you can integrate these technologies that are coming out. More and more people are coming online, and as you know, with DecoNetwork, that's something that I'm very concerned about, making sure people come online the right way and work the business processes the right way. The great thing is when you have a digital tool chain where you're getting art directly from your website, where things are finally, and as everyone comes along with that in the customer world, you can finally go to places like Stahls where you can buy transfers. You can send that art directly off, get the transfer back to you, and just with a heat press in your machine, you can do great multimedia, and you can also do customization directly off of that digital tool chain. And that's really where I see people at, is getting that personalization going, working on their websites, and having that sales all the time, and having that tool. Ultimately, you're always just trying to make it easier for the customer to buy from you.
And I think that's really going to be the most important thing moving forward for decorating shops that really want to progress and they want to be the future of decorating. It's being able to offer that personalization and do it in a way that's easy for your customers to order and for them to be able to produce it very quickly. So I think definitely a lot of opportunity to move forward there and to advance.
Absolutely. And honestly, when you have good tools and you have the setup, the throughput worked out, it's easy for you, it's easy for the customer, and it's just a win-win all over the place.
Yeah, definitely a win-win. We appreciate you coming in, like I said, to the Stahls TV studios and spending some time with us here, and we'll see you guys next time.